It wasn't a mistake that ruined my marriage. It wasn't a betrayal, either. It wasn't even something I saw coming. It was a simple suggestion, one that seemed innocent enough at the time, that sent everything spiraling out of control. And it started on a random Tuesday evening when we were supposed to be talking about something as mundane as grocery shopping. I'm not one to get swept up in emotions. I'm methodical, pragmatic. I like knowing where I stand and keeping things predictable. But that night, things shifted in a way I didn't understand then, and still don't fully understand now. It began like this: "We should try an open marriage." Those were the words that fell out of her mouth as if she had just mentioned what we should have for dinner. No hesitation. No apology. Just a statement. I wasn't prepared for it. We weren't talking about anything remotely related to relationships or commitment. We were just sitting on the couch, flipping through Netflix, deciding on which show would keep us both awake long enough to finish a couple of episodes. We'd been together for 5 years, and in that time, I thought I knew her better than I knew myself. She never seemed the type to suggest something like this, and yet, there it was, hanging in the air like a broken promise. My initial reaction was to laugh. I mean, surely she was joking, right? It was one of those offhand comments meant to get a reaction, a sarcastic remark to break the monotony. But when I looked over at her, there was no smile on her face, no playful glint in her eyes, just silence, and a strange tension that I hadn't felt in our relationship before. "I'm serious," she said, her voice steady but low, as if she'd been thinking about this for a while. I blinked, unsure how to respond. My brain was processing the words, but they didn't make sense together in any logical way. "Open marriage?" I repeated, like I could somehow force the words into a meaning I could understand. She nodded, then proceeded to explain. It wasn't what I thought it would be, at least not at first. There were no wild stories of secret affairs or fantasy-like indulgences. She wasn't talking about any of that. She was talking about freedom, about being able to explore desires, meet new people, experience life in ways that felt limited by traditional expectations. She said she loved me, but that didn't mean she couldn't love other things, other experiences. I listened, but in some distant corner of my mind, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't the woman I'd known for years. This wasn't the woman I'd married. She wasn't the type to throw our bond into question, not like this. And yet, there she was, talking to me about a new chapter. It didn't make sense. Was she bored? Was she dissatisfied? Was it me? Was I doing something wrong? I didn't ask her those questions, though. I couldn't. I didn't know if I wanted the answers. "I need some time to think about this," I finally said, my voice quieter than I intended. She looked at me for a moment, like she was expecting something else, but when I didn't say anything more, she simply nodded. The next few days felt like a haze. I couldn't shake her words, her suggestion. I tried to keep busy, focus on work, pretend nothing had changed. But the truth was, something had shifted in our relationship. A line had been drawn, and once it was there, it wasn't something you could erase with a few comforting words. My mind was filled with images of her with someone else. The thought gnawed at me, like a persistent itch I couldn't scratch. I began to watch her more closely. I started noticing small things, like how she would linger over her phone a little too long when she thought I wasn't paying attention, how she'd go out with friends more often, and how there was a distance growing between us that I couldn't close. It wasn't in the way she spoke to me. It was in her eyes. They were distant, almost like she was looking at something beyond me, something I couldn't reach. And then, she started asking more questions. "How would you feel if I met someone?" she asked one night, her tone casual, but laced with an undercurrent I couldn't ignore. I didn't know how to respond. I wanted to scream, to tell her no, to demand that she forget about it. But I didn't. I just stared at her, trying to form words that wouldn't betray the confusion, the fear, the rage that was bubbling inside me. I felt like a stranger in my own home, sitting next to someone who I thought I knew. "I'm not sure," I finally said, the words feeling like they were coming from someone else. "I don't think I'm ready for that." She nodded again, but this time, there was no relief in her expression, no reassurance, just a quiet acceptance that whatever this was, we were heading down a path I wasn't sure we could come back from. The thing about open marriage is, it's not just about the freedom to explore other people. It's about confronting the darkest parts of yourself, the insecurities, the fears, the jealousy, and deciding whether you can live with them or let them destroy you. But I didn't know that then. I didn't realize that agreeing to an open marriage wasn't just about saying yes to her. It was about saying yes to a reality I didn't want. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just her idea anymore. This was something we were both now involved in, something we couldn't undo once it started. And when she left the house for the first time to meet someone, I realized I had made a terrible mistake. It's strange how quickly everything can change once you've said yes to something you never thought you would. It's almost like stepping through a door you didn't know existed, and once you're on the other side, you realize there's no way back. I wasn't ready to face the consequences, but I had already opened the door, and once it was open, there was no way to close it. I should have listened to that voice in the back of my head, the one that told me this was a bad idea, the one that told me I was being naive. But instead, I found myself just going along with it. After Marissa suggested the idea of an open marriage, it felt like I was in shock for the first few days. I kept telling myself it was a conversation, just a thought. But the more I tried to ignore it, the more I realized she wasn't just talking about an idea. She was talking about her needs. And if I didn't take them seriously, I might lose her entirely. It was on a Sunday night when she told me she had arranged to meet someone. "I think it'll be good for me," she said, as casually as if she was telling me she was going to grab coffee with a friend. I could hear the excitement in her voice, the same excitement she'd had when we first met. But now it was different. It wasn't about me. It was about her own desires, her exploration. It was about something I couldn't be a part of. She told me she'd be gone for a couple of hours. "You'll be fine," she reassured me with a soft kiss on the cheek as she grabbed her purse and left the house. I tried to calm myself, telling myself it wasn't a big deal. We talked about this, right? She wasn't going to meet someone to replace me. It was just an experience, an experiment. It wasn't like she was falling in love with someone else. But as soon as the door closed behind her, a wave of nausea hit me. I tried to distract myself by turning on the TV, but I couldn't concentrate. My thoughts were all over the place. What was she doing right now? Was she having a good time? Was she feeling something I couldn't give her anymore? The questions swirled in my mind, each one digging deeper than the last. And the more I tried to ignore it, the more real it became. I checked the clock every 10 minutes, then every 5. It was 9 p.m., then 10, then 11. Each passing minute felt like an eternity. I wanted to believe she was just out having fun, experiencing something new. But that nagging feeling, the one that told me something wasn't right, grew stronger with every second. Was she having second thoughts? Was she regretting her decision to even ask me about this? By the time the clock struck midnight, I couldn't stay in the house anymore. I needed to know. I needed to understand what was really happening. I grabbed my jacket, my keys, and left the house before I even realized what I was doing. My mind was racing. My heart was pounding. I drove in a haze, the streets blurring in front of me as I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting. I wasn't stalking her. I wasn't trying to control her. But that voice in my head, it was screaming. I parked a block away from the cafe where she'd said she was meeting him. I didn't know what I expected to find, but I had to see it for myself. Maybe it was the fear of being wrong, of finding out something I didn't want to know. But I couldn't stop myself. I watched as she walked into the cafe, her head held high, her body language different from the way she acted when she was with me. She was confident, comfortable in a way that I wasn't used to seeing. It was like she had become someone else, someone who wasn't mine anymore. I stayed in my car, frozen, not knowing what to do next. I could leave. I could drive back home and pretend this didn't happen. But I couldn't. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was slipping away from me, something I couldn't get back. I stayed there for over an hour, watching as she laughed with him, as she smiled in a way I hadn't seen in months. And that's when it hit me. She wasn't just looking for an experience. She was looking for something more. The connection, the chemistry, the feeling of being desired. Those were things I hadn't been able to give her in the last few months. I'd been so caught up in my routine, in the mundane, that I had let our relationship drift. I had let her drift. When she finally left the cafe and got into the man's car, my heart sank. The door slammed shut with a finality that felt like it was echoing through my chest. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to feel. But I couldn't just sit there anymore. I drove back home, but this time, the house didn't feel like home. The walls felt too close, the silence too loud. I tried to go to sleep, but sleep wouldn't come. My mind wouldn't shut off. I kept replaying everything over and over. Her words, her smile, her excitement about meeting someone new. It was a betrayal, wasn't it? Not in the traditional sense, but still, it hurt. It hurt more than I ever expected it would. And when she came back the next morning, smiling as if nothing had happened, I knew things were never going to be the same again. The morning after Marissa came back, everything was off. It was almost as if the house itself had changed overnight. I woke up to the smell of coffee, her favorite morning ritual, but something about the air felt colder. I could hear her moving around the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared breakfast. But I couldn't shake the images from the night before. Her smile, her laugh, the way she'd looked at him, like she was seeing the world through a different lens. I had been holding my breath all night, hoping that when she came home, things would feel normal again. But they didn't. I tried to act like nothing had happened, forcing a smile when I walked into the kitchen. "Good morning," I said, my voice sounding more hollow than I intended. She turned to me with a grin, completely at ease. It was almost like the events of the night before hadn't affected her at all. She kissed me on the cheek and handed me a cup of coffee. "Morning," she replied, her tone light, almost playful. "How'd you sleep?" I didn't know how to answer. How do you tell someone that you spent the entire night replaying their actions in your mind? How do you say that you felt like a stranger in your own home? So, I just nodded, taking the coffee from her and sitting down at the table. The silence between us felt heavy. Every time she spoke, it was like a piece of glass in my chest, and every time I responded, it felt like the words were coming from someone else. "Did you have fun last night?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. I immediately regretted it, knowing how it would sound. But it was too late. She didn't miss a beat, smiling as she set down a plate of eggs. "It was nice," she said casually. "We had some good conversation. Just, getting to know each other." "Yeah," I replied, my voice cracking slightly. "What did you talk about?" She seemed to think for a moment before shrugging. "Just life. Work. Interests. Nothing crazy." It should have been fine. It should have been just another normal conversation between us. But it wasn't. My mind was racing. "Nothing crazy" felt like a euphemism for something I didn't want to acknowledge, something I wasn't sure I could even understand. I tried to focus on my food, tried to focus on anything but the way my heart was racing in my chest. But the thoughts kept coming, uninvited. After breakfast, she kissed me again before heading out the door. "I'm going to meet up with Sarah for a while. I'll be back later," she said, sounding upbeat, as if everything was just fine. I didn't answer right away. I just stood there, watching her grab her bag and leave. The door closed behind her with a soft click, and I was left alone in the silence. And in that silence, 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting, that everything she did last night was perfectly harmless. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. She wasn't the woman I had married anymore. I wasn't sure if she had ever been. I spent the rest of the day pacing around the house, lost in my thoughts. I tried to distract myself by working, but I couldn't concentrate. It was like a dark cloud had settled over me, and every minute that passed felt like a lifetime. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing her, that she was slipping away from me, one moment at a time, and I was powerless to stop it. When she returned that evening, her smile seemed different. There was a certain detachment in her eyes. She kissed me on the cheek again, but this time, it didn't feel like it used to. The warmth that had always been there was gone. She was still the same person, but she was also someone else now, someone I didn't recognize. "You okay?" she asked, noticing that I hadn't said much since she got home. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, just tired. Long day." She seemed to accept that, but there was a brief flicker of uncertainty in her eyes before she turned away. I knew it wasn't just the day that was bothering me. It was her. It was everything she had started to build outside of our marriage. And I was standing on the sidelines, watching it unfold, unable to do anything about it. The next few days were a blur. Marissa started spending more time with her friends, going out more often, staying out late. And every time she left, I felt a pang of anxiety in my chest. I wanted to be supportive. I wanted to be the husband who trusted his wife completely. But I couldn't. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing her. That this open marriage thing wasn't just an experiment for her. It was a way out. And then, one evening, she came home later than usual. I had been sitting in the living room, waiting, unable to distract myself. I heard the sound of keys in the lock and my heart skipped a beat. She walked in, her eyes wide, a little out of breath. "Sorry I'm late," she said, But there was something in her voice, something I couldn't place. What happened? I asked, before I could stop myself. I wasn't expecting her to answer. Not like this. She hesitated for a moment before shrugging. It's nothing. Just, some stuff came up with Sarah. We had a late dinner. I looked at her, trying to read her face, but I couldn't. There was something in her eyes, something that didn't belong. She was hiding something. I knew it. I could feel it in my gut. But I didn't ask her. I couldn't. I wanted to, though. I wanted to demand the truth. I wanted to know exactly what had happened, who she had been with, and what she had done. But I didn't. I just sat there, pretending everything was fine. Pretending I could handle it. That night, as I lay in bed beside her, I realized I was more alone than I had ever been. The person I loved, the person I thought I knew, was no longer here. She was somewhere else, with someone else. And I was just waiting for her to come back. But deep down, I knew she never would. It's strange how something so small, so seemingly insignificant, can break you. At first, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me. Late nights, a little bit of jealousy, maybe some insecurity creeping in where it didn't belong. But the more I watched Marissa, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She wasn't the woman I married anymore. I had thought I could handle the open marriage idea, that I could be the understanding husband who could let go of his possessiveness for the sake of her happiness. But each day, the distance between us grew. At first, it was subtle. Little things. She'd leave her phone unlocked, her messages open, or she'd tell me she was meeting a friend but wouldn't say who. It wasn't about her actions anymore. It was the way she acted when she came home. The way her eyes sparkled when she talked about her days out with people I didn't know. The excitement in her voice when she told me about her adventures, as though I wasn't even there. I knew I should be happy for her. I knew I should be supportive. She was living her life, experiencing things outside of our marriage, things she'd told me she needed to explore. But something in me felt hollow, like I was just a spectator in my own relationship. It wasn't her fault. She had every right to feel curious, to want more than what we had, even if it hurt. But it was impossible to ignore the growing sense that she was slipping away from me, one small piece at a time. It wasn't until the night she came home after a weekend trip with some of her new friends that I knew for sure. She came back a little later than usual, her cheeks flushed, her smile a little too wide. There was something in her step, a new confidence that I didn't recognize. It wasn't like her. Marissa had always been laid back, a little shy when it came to strangers. But now, she walked with a new energy, like the world was at her feet. She dropped her bag by the door and kissed me on the cheek, but this time, I didn't feel the usual warmth. There was a barrier between us, invisible but strong. I had such a great time, she said, her eyes shining. We went out dancing, met some incredible people. It was exactly what I needed. I felt my stomach turn. I didn't know what it was. Maybe it was the way she said it. Or maybe it was the fact that she hadn't mentioned any of it beforehand. But in that moment, I realized something I had been avoiding. I didn't know her anymore. I didn't know who she was outside of the person she'd become in this new phase of our relationship. And I hated it. I hated how much she seemed to be changing, and I hated how much it hurt. Who did you meet? I asked before I could stop myself. The words sounded accusatory, even though I didn't mean them to be. I wasn't sure if I wanted to hear the answer, but the question slipped out like it was on autopilot. She didn't hesitate. Oh, just some people. We all hit it off. One guy, in particular, was really interesting. He's into photography, like me. She smiled, but there was a flicker in her eyes that I couldn't place. It was nice, Robert. Really nice. I wanted to push her, to ask what had happened, how far things had gone. But something stopped me. I don't know if it was the look on her face, or the fact that I was scared of what I might hear. I'd spent days, weeks, questioning her, questioning myself, and I was tired. Tired of trying to hold on to something that seemed to be slipping through my fingers. But I didn't just sit there in silence. I'm glad you had fun, I said, the words coming out hollow. I stood up and walked into the kitchen, needing to put some distance between us. I'm glad you're getting what you need. She followed me into the kitchen, her tone suddenly soft. Robert, I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere. I just need to explore some things. It's not about you. You know that, right? I turned to face her, and for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to really look at her. I saw the woman I had married. Her eyes, the same eyes I had fallen in love with, but there was something different. She wasn't just the woman I had known. She was someone else now, someone who had changed, and I wasn't sure I could follow her on that journey anymore. "I don't know if I can do this, Marissa," I said, my voice almost a whisper. I didn't mean for it to sound like that. I didn't mean to sound defeated. But the truth was, I was lost. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could just let you do your thing and trust that everything would be okay. But it's not okay. I feel like I'm losing you, and I don't know how to get you back." She stood there for a moment, her face unreadable. Then, she took a deep breath. "Robert, this isn't about losing you. I'm not looking for someone else to replace you. I'm just exploring. You're still my partner. But I need to feel free, Robert. I need to know that I'm not just stuck in one place." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I knew she wasn't trying to hurt me, but it did, and I didn't know how to respond. She had a point. I had been holding on to something that didn't exist anymore, and maybe I was the one who was stuck. But I didn't know how to change, how to let go of the things I had always believed about love and marriage. I felt my chest tighten, and for the first time in a long time, I realized something. I wasn't just afraid of losing her. I was afraid of losing myself. I didn't know who I was without her. I didn't know who I was if I wasn't the man who could hold it all together, who could be the rock she leaned on. But she didn't need me to be that anymore. "I need some time," I said, almost too quietly. "I need to think about this." She nodded slowly, her eyes softening. "Take all the time you need. I just need you to understand." I didn't answer. I couldn't. What was there to understand? I felt like I was drowning in my own uncertainty, caught between what I wanted and what she needed. But at that moment, I realized something else. This was no longer just about us. It was about me, too. And I had to figure out who I was in this new version of our marriage. The days after that conversation with Marissa felt like they stretched on endlessly. I tried to go about my daily routine, acting like nothing had changed, but everything had changed. The house felt emptier, the air thicker. It was like living in a room that had been painted in a color you didn't recognize. I could smell the coffee brewing in the mornings, but it didn't smell the same. I could hear her laughter as she chatted with friends, but it felt distant, almost like it was coming from someone else's life. I tried to push my feelings aside, to convince myself that this was just a phase, that Marissa was only doing what she needed to do. But every time she left the house, every time she came home late, I felt that knot of unease tightening in my chest. There were days when she'd walk in after spending time with her new friends, her face flushed with excitement, and I would catch a glimpse of something in her eyes, a spark I didn't recognize. It was like she was seeing the world through a lens that I didn't have access to anymore. One afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to know what was going on. My thoughts were spinning out of control. I'd become obsessed with the idea that she was hiding something from me, something more than just casual meetings or exploring. The unease had shifted into something darker, something I wasn't sure I could shake. I needed answers, and if she wasn't going to give them to me, I'd find them myself. I waited until she left the house to run some errands. I knew she'd be gone for at least an hour. And with that knowledge, I did something I'd never thought I would do. I went through her phone. I had no right to do it. I knew that, but I couldn't stop myself. I felt like I was drowning in uncertainty, and this was the only way to get some clarity. I picked up her phone from the kitchen counter, and my hands trembled as I unlocked it. It felt like a betrayal just holding it in my hands. But at that moment, I convinced myself that I needed to know the truth. I started with her messages. There were conversations with friends, nothing particularly alarming at first. But then I stumbled upon a thread of messages with a number I didn't recognize. The conversation was playful, flirtatious even. My heart started to race as I scrolled through the exchanges. They talked about meeting up again. They discussed plans for the weekend, mentioning places I knew she'd been to recently. But the thing that hit me hardest was the tone. There was a level of intimacy in those messages that I hadn't seen in her texts with anyone else. As I read, I felt something cold spread through my chest. This wasn't just an exploration. This was something deeper. She was connecting with someone else in a way that felt personal. I clicked on the contact's name, hoping for something, anything, that would make sense of what I was reading. But when the profile picture loaded, my stomach dropped. The man in the picture was someone I had seen before, at a party we had attended months ago. I remembered him now. His name was James. He was charming, outgoing, everything I wasn't. He had made a joke about taking Marissa out for coffee during the party, and I had laughed it off, assuming it was just a joke. Now, reading these messages, I realized I had missed something I should have noticed all along. There was a connection between them that went beyond just friendly chatter. There was an attraction there, one that felt like it was moving towards something more. I felt like I was suffocating. The walls of the house felt like they were closing in on me, pressing down on my chest. Every word I read only deepened the ache inside. She wasn't just exploring something new. She was building something with someone else. She was investing in a connection that had nothing to do with me. Before I could process the overwhelming emotions swirling inside me, I heard the door open. Marissa was back. I quickly put the phone back on the counter, wiping my hands on my jeans, my heart still pounding in my chest. I tried to act normal, tried to settle my thoughts, but the damage had already been done. I knew the truth now. She walked into the kitchen, smiling, as if everything was just fine. "Hey," she said, brushing past me to put her things down. Her eyes flickered to the counter, and then back to me, but she didn't say anything about the phone. She didn't seem to notice anything was off. I stood there for a moment, fighting the urge to confront her immediately. The words were on the tip of my tongue, but I held back. I didn't know how to even start this conversation. I wasn't prepared for the confrontation, for the rawness of what I was feeling, but I knew I had to say something. I couldn't just pretend that everything was okay when I knew it wasn't. "Marissa," I said, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. She looked up at me, her smile softening. She probably thought it was just another one of those conversations where I would voice a small concern, and then we'd go back to our normal routine. But it wasn't. "I need to know what's really going on," I said, my voice a little more firm now. She tilted her head, confusion flickering across her face. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice neutral. I looked her in the eye, gathering every ounce of courage I had left. "I know about James," I said, the words tasting like bitter metal in my mouth. Her face didn't immediately register shock or guilt. Instead, she blinked slowly, her gaze shifting to the floor as she processed what I had said. "You went through my phone?" she asked, her voice tight now. "I had to know," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "I had to know what was happening behind my back. I've been watching you, and I know it's wrong, but I couldn't stop myself. I couldn't just keep pretending everything was fine when I knew it wasn't." She took a deep breath, and for a moment, I thought she might say something comforting. But instead, she looked up at me, her expression unreadable. "Robert," she began slowly, "you don't understand. This wasn't about betraying you. This was about me figuring out who I am. I love you, but I've needed to explore my own desires, my own life outside of us. I didn't want to hurt you, but I had to do this for myself." It was as if everything she had said in the past few weeks clicked into place, all at once. The excitement, the secret meetings, the growing distance. This wasn't just about freedom. It was about a transformation she had already begun, and I wasn't sure I could keep up anymore. I don't think I fully understood what Marissa had been saying until that moment. There's a part of you, a tiny voice, that hopes you're wrong when you confront someone you love about something that doesn't sit right. But in that moment, I knew. She wasn't just telling me the truth. She was telling me something I didn't want to hear, something I wasn't sure I could handle. "I didn't want to hurt you, Robert," she repeated, her voice softer now, like she was trying to comfort me, but the distance in her words was undeniable. "But I had to do this. I've been holding it in for so long, and I needed to feel free, to be someone else for a little while. You're not the problem, Robert. I'm not saying you're not enough, but I'm different now." Her words hung in the air like an unsolvable equation, and I stood there, trying to wrap my head around them. I had never imagined she felt this way. For years, I'd believed that our bond was solid, that our love was enough. I had convinced myself that we had built something unbreakable. But now, here she was, standing in front of me, telling me that she had been living a lie, at least part of it. She'd been living a separate life, one that I had never been a part of, and I didn't know how to react. I could feel the coldness in my chest, the weight of the realization sinking deeper with each passing second. She wasn't just emotionally distant. She wasn't just exploring a new side of herself. She was telling me, in no uncertain terms, that I wasn't enough anymore. And for the first time in our relationship, I wasn't sure if I could be what she needed. I wasn't sure if I was capable of holding this together any longer. I wanted to scream, to ask her why she hadn't told me sooner, why she hadn't been honest with me from the start. But I couldn't. My throat felt tight, and the words I wanted to say stuck in my chest. All I could do was stand there, silently, as she watched me, her face an unreadable mask of guilt and sorrow. I swallowed hard, my mind racing, trying to find some kind of anchor in this storm. So what does this mean for us? I finally managed to ask. My voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. She bit her lip, looking away for a moment. I don't know, she said, her voice small now, as if she wasn't sure what answer I wanted. I never wanted to hurt you. I thought I could keep this part of me hidden, keep us intact. But I can't, Robert. I can't live a lie anymore. And I can't keep pretending that things haven't changed between us. I felt the floor drop beneath me. It was like everything I had known about our relationship, about us, was suddenly unraveling. How had I not seen this coming? How had I allowed us to get to this point? I had ignored the signs, pushed my doubts aside for too long. Now, standing there in front of her, I could feel the walls closing in. I don't know how to fix this, I admitted, the words bitter on my tongue. I hadn't meant to say it, but the truth was staring me in the face. I don't know how to make things right when it feels like we're already broken. She reached out to touch my arm, her fingers trembling slightly, but I couldn't bring myself to meet her gaze. I was afraid that if I did, I might shatter completely. I don't want us to be broken, she said softly. But I don't know if we can go back to what we were. I've changed, Robert, and I need to be honest with myself about who I am now. I felt the weight of her words crushing me, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. What was there to say? What could I say when everything I thought I knew had just crumbled? We were at a crossroads, and I couldn't see a way forward that didn't leave us both broken in different ways. For the rest of the evening, we didn't speak much. I could feel the tension between us, thick and suffocating. She was right there, in the same space as me, but she might as well have been miles away. I didn't know if I could go on pretending everything was okay, but I didn't know how to let go, either. She was my best friend, my confidant. She was the woman I had loved for years, and now it felt like I was losing her, piece by piece. The next few days were a blur. We didn't talk much about what had happened. Instead, we went through the motions of daily life, both of us pretending that things were somehow normal, even when everything felt wrong. She was still going out more, meeting new people, while I stayed home, waiting for her to come back to me, waiting for the conversation we both knew needed to happen, but couldn't bring ourselves to have. One night, about a week after our confrontation, she came home late again. I could tell something had changed in her, in the way she walked into the house, the way she looked at me. She wasn't smiling this time. There was no excitement in her eyes, no hint of the joy she had once carried with her. It was like she was already somewhere else, emotionally, even though she was physically right in front of me. I need to talk to you, she said, her voice more serious than usual. She didn't wait for me to respond, just sat down beside me on the couch, her hands twisting in her lap. My stomach tightened. What's going on? I asked, my heart racing. I had a sinking feeling in my chest, like something irreversible was about to happen. I don't know how to say this, but I've been seeing James more. It's been a lot of fun, Robert. More than I ever thought it would be. She hesitated, her eyes not meeting mine as she spoke. I don't think I can go back to being the person I was. I don't think I can pretend anymore. I need space. I need to figure things out, without you. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. My breath caught in my throat, and I felt like I was going to collapse. She was telling me, in no uncertain terms, that she was leaving me, emotionally, at least. She had already stepped out of our marriage, and I was just now realizing how far gone she really was. I think it's time for us to take a break, she said softly. I think I need time to figure out who I am without this. Without us. I couldn't breathe. The words were a blur, but they were clear enough. She was telling me she needed space, but what did that even mean for us? Was this the end? Had I already lost her? I wanted to scream, to beg her not to go, but I couldn't. All I could do was sit there in stunned silence, feeling the weight of the emptiness settle over me. The words she said hit me like a thunderclap, sharp and sudden, leaving me breathless and motionless. She needed space. Time to figure out who she was without me. And that was the moment I realized. Everything was slipping away, and I couldn't do a thing to stop it. I had been living in denial, fooling myself into thinking that this was just a phase she needed to work through. But the truth had been staring me in the face all along. She wasn't just experimenting with her freedom, she was falling for someone else. She was already building a life outside of our marriage, a life I wasn't a part of. And no amount of denial could change that. Marissa sat beside me on the couch, her hands clasped tightly together, her body turned slightly away from me, as if she was already preparing for the distance between us. I didn't know what to say. My mind was racing, thoughts colliding and crashing, but no words seemed to come out. I felt as if the room had grown too small, too suffocating. The weight of her admission crushed me from all sides, and I couldn't breathe. Are you sure about this? I asked, the words barely leaving my lips. I didn't even know if I wanted the answer. But I needed to hear it. I needed to know if this was the end, if the space she was talking about was just the first step towards something that would tear us apart completely. She looked at me then, her expression soft but resolute. I don't want to hurt you, Robert, she said, her voice trembling slightly. But I can't keep pretending. I can't keep living like I'm someone I'm not. And I can't ask you to be someone you're not, either. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her that we could fix it, that we could find our way back to each other. But deep down, I knew it was too late. She had already made up her mind. She had already moved on, in a way that I couldn't even understand. I had failed her somehow. I hadn't seen the warning signs, hadn't been aware of the distance growing between us, until it was too late. And now she was telling me that she needed to figure things out without me. I stood up, my legs feeling like they were made of lead. The room was spinning, and I had to steady myself against the couch. The silence between us stretched out, thick and uncomfortable. I couldn't look at her. I couldn't look at the woman who had been my everything, the woman I had planned my future with. But now she was a stranger. I think you should go, I said, my voice a little rougher than I meant it to be. The words felt foreign coming from me, like I didn't even recognize my own voice anymore. But I needed space too. Space to breathe, space to think, space to figure out how I had gotten to this point. Her face faltered for a moment, but she nodded, standing up slowly. I'll pack some things, she said quietly, her eyes avoiding mine. She didn't argue, didn't try to convince me otherwise. I think she already knew what I was feeling, what I had come to realize. I watched her walk into the bedroom, her back to me as she gathered a few of her things. It was surreal. I never thought it would come to this. I never imagined the woman I loved, the woman I had built my entire life around, would be standing in front of me, telling me she needed space to figure out who she was without me. I thought we were stronger than that. But now, standing there in the empty silence, I realized how much I had taken our relationship for granted. I had allowed it to slip into autopilot, thinking that love would always be enough. But love was never enough. Not when we stopped communicating, not when we stopped being there for each other in the ways that truly mattered. I don't know how much time passed before she finally finished packing. When she came back into the living room, she was holding a small bag in her hand, her face expressionless. There were no tears, no dramatic goodbyes. It was as if we were two strangers meeting for the first time, and she was leaving without a word. I'll be staying with a friend for a while, she said, her voice flat. I'll figure out where I'm going after that. I just need time. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. She turned to leave, but then paused at the door, her hand on the handle. Robert, she said, her voice cracking for the briefest of moments. I never wanted to hurt you. I still care about you. I always will. But I need to do this. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I watched her walk out the door, the sound of it closing behind her echoing through the empty house. And in that moment, I knew our marriage was over. I knew that whatever love we had left, whatever bond we once shared, had been broken beyond repair. The silence in the house was deafening. I sat down on the couch, feeling the weight of her absence settle over me like a cold, suffocating blanket. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly alone. For the next few days, I did nothing but exist. I couldn't bring myself to do much else. I tried to keep myself busy, working, going through the motions of daily life, but it all felt pointless. The house felt too big, too empty. Every corner, every room, reminded me of her. I spent hours staring at the walls, wondering what went wrong. How had we gotten here? What had I missed? What could I have done differently? But no answers came. Only silence. The silence of a life that had once been full of laughter and conversation, now reduced to a hollow echo of what it used to be. And then, after a week of avoiding everything that reminded me of Marissa, I received a text. It was from James. The text from James was unexpected, and it hit me harder than I ever thought it would. At first, I couldn't bring myself to open it. My fingers hovered over the screen, unsure whether I even wanted to know what it said. But curiosity, and perhaps a need for closure, drove me to unlock my phone and read it. It was simple. "Hey Robert, I know this might seem strange, but I think we need to talk. I owe you some answers." For a moment, I hesitated. What could he possibly want to say? And why was he reaching out to me now, after everything? But the part of me that still cared about Marissa, that still wanted to understand the truth, pushed me to respond. "Okay," I typed back. "Let's talk." I didn't know what I was walking into, but when I agreed to meet James the next day at a nearby cafe, I wasn't expecting the conversation that followed. When we sat down, he didn't waste time. He looked at me directly, his eyes sincere. "I want you to know that I never intended to hurt you," he started. "When Marissa and I started spending time together, I had no idea how complicated things were for her. I wasn't trying to come between you two, and I never would." I nodded, still trying to process everything. But as the conversation went on, I started to see things in a different light. James wasn't some villain in my story. He wasn't trying to take Marissa away from me. He was simply someone who had become a part of her journey, a part that she had needed to explore for herself. As James spoke, I realized something. This whole situation had never been about me versus him. It had always been about Marissa's need for freedom and self-discovery. She wasn't looking for someone else to replace me. She was looking for a way to reconnect with herself, to explore parts of her identity she had long ignored. In a way, I understood that. I had been so focused on the pain, on my own loss, that I hadn't taken the time to understand what Marissa had been going through. James explained how Marissa had been struggling with feeling trapped in a version of herself she didn't fully recognize. How, through their conversations and experiences, she had started to rediscover pieces of who she was outside of our marriage. He wasn't just an outsider. He was a mirror for her to see herself in a new way. The more he spoke, the more I realized that this wasn't something personal against me. Marissa's journey wasn't about rejecting me. It was about accepting herself. And somewhere along the way, I had lost sight of my own growth. I had become so focused on keeping our relationship perfect that I had stopped allowing either of us the space to change, to evolve. By the end of the conversation, James apologized again and offered me his hand, as if to say, "I'm not your enemy." And I realized he wasn't. We weren't in competition for Marissa's love. We were both part of her story, but not the entire story. When I returned home that afternoon, I felt a shift inside me. The house still felt empty, but now, it felt like a space where something new could begin. I took a deep breath, knowing that healing wouldn't be immediate, but that it would happen. Slowly, but surely. A few days later, Marissa reached out to me. Her message was simple: "I'd like to talk." I was nervous, unsure if this was the conversation I had been dreading or if it would be the one that offered me closure. When we met, her eyes were filled with a mix of sadness and hope. She looked at me for a long moment before speaking. "I've been thinking a lot about everything, about us," she said softly. "I've made so many mistakes, but I want you to know that I still care about you. I always have." I nodded, my heart heavy with everything I had been through, but also light with the possibility of forgiveness. "I know," I said. "I care about you too." We talked for hours that day, about everything and nothing, about what went wrong, about the spaces we both needed to explore, and about the future that, for the first time in a long while, didn't feel so uncertain. I learned that sometimes, love isn't about holding on tightly. Sometimes, it's about giving each other the freedom to grow, even if it means stepping away for a while. Marissa wasn't the same person I had married, and neither was I. But maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. Maybe we both needed to evolve in different ways before we could come back together, stronger. It wasn't an instant fix, and it didn't happen overnight. But in the weeks that followed, we took small steps toward rebuilding our relationship. We went to counseling together, we talked more openly about our needs, and most importantly, we listened to each other. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of doubt, moments when I felt like we might never get back to where we once were. But with time, I started to believe that we could. Maybe not exactly where we had been, but somewhere new, somewhere better. And in that new space, we found a different kind of love. Not the perfect love I had imagined, but a real, human love, built on understanding, trust, and the willingness to give each other the space to grow. Marissa and I didn't just survive what we had gone through, we thrived. We learned to navigate our own journeys, separately and together. And for the first time, I felt like we were both truly living, not just existing in a story that wasn't our own. As the months passed, I realized that the open marriage, the pain, the heartbreak, had all been part of a greater process. It had forced me to look inward, to face my own insecurities and flaws. It had made me realize that I wasn't just someone who loved her. I was someone who needed to love myself first. In the end, the love we shared was more than enough. It was enough to rebuild, enough to forgive, and enough to start again. And as we walked forward, hand in hand, into this new chapter of our lives, I knew that everything that had happened, the good, the bad, and the ugly, had led us to a place where we were both free to be who we were meant to be, together. And that, in the end, was the most beautiful thing of all.